I'm going to turn it over now to our partners from Iowa Legal Aid. We've got Josh Gall and Stephen Dressel here today to take us through some of the different aspects that Iowa Legal Aid can offer our disaster survivors, kind of the legal timeline that we can see after a disaster, things to watch out for, things that folks may present to you as you to help them recover, and how you can best engage Iowa Legal Aid and other partners to direct an efficient recovery. So I'll turn it over to Josh, get out of the way, and I'll let him take you through the next 45 minutes or so.
All right, thank you, Brett, and thanks for having us here to be able to talk about the work that Iowa Legal Aid does, both in general and then in the disaster context. And as you can see on the slide, my name is Josh Gall. I'm Iowa Legal Aid's managing attorney for our disaster project and our rural justice project for older Iowans. I've been with Iowa Legal Aid since August 10th, 2009. I've been involved in disaster work since 2015. I'm based in Des Moines. With my first disaster response, got a good lesson as far as like you can't always prepare for what's going to happen. I figured I'd be involved with a tornado, flood, severe storm, and my first response was actually to the bird flu. We had I think it was in Rock Rapids, Iowa area. There was a egg laying operation that had to lay off a couple hundred workers as a result of didn't have work to do after they euthanized their flock. And so we're part of a Iowa workforce development kind of rapid response deployment to talk to the workers. And from the legal end, basically talking about what happens if you can't pay your bills, like what to pay first, what happens if you can't pay your rent, utilities, and things like that. But again, it was a good lesson of you don't always know what you're going to be asked to respond to. And I'll ask Steve to say a few things about himself.
I'm Steve Dressel. I'm also at Iowa Legal Aid. I've been working with the disaster response team for about a year and a half now. And I basically my focus is twofold. One is to try to get legal assessments out to victims or survivors of the 2020 derecho storm. And I also do faith-based organization outreach. So if you do have any contacts or, have faith-based organizations that we can partner with in different ways, we probably will have an event in the fall for them. Please, talk to me separately if you can afterwards, or, that would be great. I also happen to personally have been a survivor, I guess, in a very, very small way of one of the tornadoes last year that took down a tree and did some damage. So I got a chance to be part of the system myself, which was a eye-opening experience.
Well, thank you, Steve. Yeah, Steve is one of our guinea pigs with staff having FEMA benefits applying for last year. So I don't want to assume background knowledge of Iowa Legal Aid, who we are, what we do, and we are not primarily a disaster response organization. I would kind of liken it to the United Methodist Church. They have a disaster arm that they do disaster work. They're not primarily a disaster response organization, and Iowa Legal Aid is the same way. So we've been around since 1977. We are not, we serve eligible clients throughout the state. We actually have 10 different regional offices. Polk County is served by our Des Moines office that, again, I'm based out of. We help with civil law issues. We're helping kind of represent low income and older Iowans. We define older as 60 or over. We're a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We're not a state entity. Sometimes people think we're a state government agency, but again, we're our own separate entity. And I would compare us a little bit to like the public defender's office. If you can't afford an attorney in the criminal context, you have a right to an attorney. In the civil context, you don't have that same right. And so we try to fill gaps basically where there are situations where the stakes are very high, where there's a justice gap to where kind of when legal aid organizations were starting to form and were starting to be funded, the idea was there's certain legal issues where, we want to prioritize people having an opportunity to have an attorney to represent them when certain high stakes legal issues are kind of there and at risk. So some of those are here, and these are the priority legal issues that we deal with at Iowa Legal Aid. And generally, so this is outside of the disaster context, even a lot of the disaster legal issues that we face are related to some of these, but housing. So about probably 40% of what we do is trying to keep people housed by representing tenants who are being evicted or homeowners who are being foreclosed on. Obviously, if you're facing homelessness, that's a significant issue as far as your health and safety. And so that's one of those legal issues that when we were deciding, or when people were deciding, what should there be an opportunity for kind of everybody to at least have a chance at some representation. Housing is one of those. We do family law. Most of that's going to be in the context of protective orders. So for a person to be eligible for our family law services, they have to be the alleged victim of domestic violence. So we're representing the alleged victim with protective orders, and then some divorce and custody, but primarily the protective order work is what we're going to be doing there. And then trying to keep income in the household, protecting that through consumer protection work. We're trying to limit debt collection. We're trying to prevent or limit wage garnishments. You know, if your bank account is garnished and it's hit, typically that's the entire account that gets hit. So for our clients, that's going to affect for everybody, that's going to affect your ability to pay for your rent, utilities, all of your important necessities, and put you behind. So we can jump in at times to try to get that garnishment either reversed completely, or at least try to work out a more affordable payment arrangement so that person's not being put behind right away, kind of fully at the front. And then public benefits. If people are eligible for public benefits, helping them sustain that eligibility. So representing folks who are facing Social Security disability or SSI terminations, helping people get veterans benefits, discharge upgrades, unemployment benefits, and then benefits like Medicaid. So basically our organization in general is trying to keep people housed, safe, protecting basic levels of income, basic levels of public benefits they might be eligible for, so they can just provide for basic necessities of life. I should say too, if you have any questions throughout, just interrupt me. So there's our regional office map. So again, I mentioned we have 10 different regional offices. Our last one we added was the Davenport office, used to be more of a local one. Iowa Legal Aid, every state has at least one legal services funded organization. A lot of them have kind of more regional legal aid organizations. They're not the same entity. Iowa, Nebraska, some other states have just one statewide legal aid provider. There are some county legal aid organizations. Story County, Muscatine County have countywide ones. We provide services there too, but again, that's the lay of the land for legal aid organizations. Any questions about us in general before I get into our work in disasters?
Do those match any other division of any other entity?
No, that would be you look at like community action program map or area agency on aging map. No, none of those align, but I'm not sure how they divided that up before my time. So people don't think of legal issues when they think of disasters. I think it's easiest when I talk about this in this context to put it in a timeline format for folks so they can kind of see what to expect as the disaster goes on. It doesn't really matter what the disaster is. We see the same timeline play out time and time again. And so you think, I don't know what a legal issue might be in a disaster. We're not going to go through these in this slide. This is just illustrative of, there are 40 different legal issues that are on this list. This isn't an exhaustive list. I've never met a legal survivor or a survivor that didn't have at least one legal issue that they would be facing that we could talk to them about. So starting with the short term, so this is one thing too, like there's a multi-agency resource center set up after a significant disaster that we like to try to be there at the table to advise people of this, because the most pressing issue that comes up where there's some significant deadlines involved is for tenants that are affected by a disaster. There's a carve out in the Iowa code that basically says that they can terminate their rental agreement and get their prepaid rent security deposit back, but they have, there's ways to make arguments if they don't meet the 14-day timeline, but it's easiest and safest if they meet this timeline. They basically have 14 days from when that disaster happened that kicked them out of the property to where they can give their landlord a notice that requests that deposit and prepaid rent back. It's not an absolute guarantee to get your deposit back. Like if you owed rent to your landlord, the landlord can still use your deposit for that. But if you were all caught up, your landlord can't use that deposit to say fix tornado damage or flood damage. That wasn't on you. And then prepaid rent, what that means is, say I paid my rent first of the month. On the second of the month, there was a flood or a tornado that basically made it so that I couldn't live there anymore. That you had basically 28, 29 days remaining in that month that you paid rent for that you didn't get the benefit of. That's the prepaid rent that you should be getting back. Your landlord has 30 days from when they get that request to give you your money back or to give you an explanation why they're not giving that back to you. There's also arguments to make, like say only part of the property is offline, like maybe a bedroom or a bathroom. There's this diminution in value argument you can make in the code that basically says I shouldn't have to pay full rent if I can't use all of my property. I should have a reduced amount of rent that I owe based on that. So again, that's a very immediate issue. There's a very technical deadline. Again, we can try to make arguments to get around that, but it's just safest that people follow that we want to see people right away. That would be in a house fire, apartment fire. This isn't just tornado, flood. This is any of those kind of disaster contexts.
Who decides if it's like not inhabitable? Like sometimes the landlord's like, oh, you could live there, and you're like, like what is there a standard, or like does it have to be an actual declared disaster?
It's easiest if like a building inspector were to say is flat out is offline. Where we run into issues is because the code standard is actually like the disaster causes an issue to where your reasonable use of the property is substantially diminished. What does that mean? There's no code law or case law that lays that out. So it's a very fact specific issue. And so, we would probably have a lower threshold of that than a landlord might have. But thankfully, we haven't had to argue that too often. But if it's flat out uninhabitable, that makes it easier than it's just flat out. If it's been like tagged or there's somebody official, a fire marshal or somebody saying you can't go in there, it's not safe, then that makes it easier. That's a good question. Yeah, AJ.
To follow up on that question is there a prerequisite for a governor's proclamation? Is there a prerequisite for like a governor's proclamation, or this can be, a single family home or apartment fire that's not declared by the governor, not a presidential disaster declaration? Those aren't thresholds that we have to overcome for your programs. Is that correct?
Right. It could be just that individual single family home. If they're affected by this, that would apply. All right. Here's getting grumpy with me.
Great.
Try it again. There you go. Another one we run into is lost identification documents. So usually if you lose a birth certificate, social security card, you need one to unlock, and there's actually another one that I'm blanking on. Birth certificate, social security, driver's license. You need one to unlock the other two. Well, what happens if you lose all three? We had this issue came up in the Davenport building collapse. I think it was July of 2023, where people didn't have time to grab stuff and go. And I think it was kind of at night. I think people were probably in bed. So it's not like you had I don't sleep with my birth certificate, driver's license in my pocket. So the governor's office did, I think, waive the fees for applying for new documents with that. Because you need those things to apply for. I think they also activated the Iowa Individual Assistance Grant Program for that, but you need identification to apply for that. If you don't have it, and that's the way with everything, you need your identification. So sometimes they try to help navigate some of that red tape. If you lose all three, it's good for us to be able to be there to write letters, explain what happened, and try to get to where they can issue at least one of the three so that you can lock the other two. Then you have insurance issues. Send them to Sonia from Iowa Insurance Division. But a lot of times at that initial level, kind of what we're looking at is, make sure you're documenting, are you filing your claim? Do you have flood insurance or not? We had the Beaverdale flooding in 4 Mile Creek in 2018 where Beaverdale none of those folks really had flood insurance. And so sometimes, depending on what kind of disaster it is, sometimes it's just giving bad news. But again, encouraging people to file claims if they have them, renters insurance issues, if they're a renter, homeowner insurance, if they have homeowners insurance, auto insurance, which for our clients, they don't typically have insurance coverage that's going to help them in any sort of fashion. If they have insurance, it's typically liability only, and disaster damages aren't covered under that. And then government benefits, if state or federal benefits are online, trying to help people navigate where to apply, how to apply. And typically that's where, I think I'll talk later about community action programs typically have done the application process for the state side. And if there's a big enough event, there's typically a disaster recovery center, but most events don't qualify for that kind of assistance. Yeah, Dutch?
Yep. You're very quick.
You need to work out today.
Just a real quick question on the renter's insurance. We've come across a few cases where renters assume that because they got a rental insurance policy that they're covered and that their things are covered. And many times what we found is that the renter's insurance is a better protection for the landlord than it is for the renter. Do you guys help with review of those policies and identification of where they might be underinsured, or just a review of overall coverage and what they have?
Not typically ahead of time. Yeah, generally, if we see an insurance issue, it's after a disaster were to happen and we're seeing it after the fact. Um, but that's, some of the grant work that we do look at trying to do some preventative things, make sure people have plans in place. And we could try to incorporate some more insurance review in that, but we haven't to date, like ahead of time. Let's look at your policy and see what fits or what doesn't. I don't know, Sonia, does the insurance division do preventative work like that?
We can, because what you're referring to, renter's insurance protects only the property within the apartment or condo or whatever. A lot of people are very confused because anymore landlords are requiring some kind of renter's insurance.
Or they see on their rent that there's a charge for insurance. It's not their insurance, it's the landlord's insurance to protect the building. I'm more than happy. I'll give you my card to take calls from anybody about this. I think it's an educational issue. There was just a fire up in the Sioux City area where all those tenants thought that they had renter's insurance. It was not. If you want renter's insurance, you have to go buy it yourself.
That'd be great. I appreciate
Yeah.
that.
That's what, a lot of times, especially to fire, the renters will think that the landlord's insurance, the landlord's own insurance will cover the hotel stay or, my stuff. And that's just not the case. That covers the building, basically, not the contents of the renter. And then typically, again, short-term legal issues. This is like that bird flu issue. There's a lot of times there might be unemployment issues. There's a business that's knocked out of commission, or maybe the person's hurt. They're not able to earn income. And so you've got kind of our just regular Iowa legal aid issues. If a person doesn't have an income, they're not going to be able to pay their rent, utilities, credit cards. And so they need advice on what to do, which ones to pay first, what happens if they can't pay those things. And then at the front level, if we're at a mark event, we're trying to help people kind of prevent contractor fraud, making sure that people know that scam artists do come out, especially if it's a high visibility disaster. Make sure they're using somebody local, licensed, bonded, reputable, that they're not paying everything all up front, that they get a written contract that staggers those payments, just trying to do preventative. Because if an ill-meaning, especially out of state, that's not a real entity, scam somebody and then they're out of state and we can't find them, there's nothing we can do about it. So trying to prevent some of that in the front end. And then I've got price gouging, which I think I'll get more into with the landlord tenant stuff. So your questions on short-term issues? The price gouging this last year, the summer especially, was more of a medium-term issue. So that's the first kind of week to 6 weeks, what we're seeing legal issues. And then we get into that 6 weeks to 6 months mark. So now we're starting to see people are getting denied for FEMA, or they're getting denied for insurance. So now we start having to advise people regarding the appeals for those things. We represent people with the insurance issue. We typically would refer people to private attorneys. We have a volunteer lawyers project that we run for 98 of Iowa's counties. Polk County runs their own, the Polk County Bar Association. And we work with them to place those cases, but there are a lot of attorneys with insurance expertise. And so we try to place those cases, but there's no private attorneys in Iowa that have a lot of FEMA experience. There's just it's not a common enough stream of cases that they're FEMA experts. So typically that's where we would jump in on FEMA appeal cases. Landlord tenant issues. Now you start coming back to, was the deposit returned? If not, do we need to do demand letters? Do we need to look at small claims actions against the landlords? Were the repairs actually made? If not, do we need to have the tenant try to find a different place to go? There's other ways outside of that 14-day context to try to get out of your lease if your landlord's not making repairs. And then price gouging. We saw this in, I should say price gouging is still demanding rent. We saw this a lot in Northwest Iowa where, the housing stock is low there to begin with as far as rentals. And then everybody, in some of these towns was affected by this. So rental properties being online, the demand for that went way up. And so rent started to go way up. So we had landlords trying to raise rent on tenants like mid-lease, and you can't do that. If you're on a month-to-month, you can do it with 30 days written notice ahead of time, but you can't just do it if you're locked into a year lease. They tried to start evicting people because they wanted to rent to somebody else for more money. And again, you can't do that just at a whim. We also had tenants that couldn't live in the property because it was so flooded out that landlords were still saying, you owe me the rent still. And that's not how it's supposed to work. You're not providing the service. If you're not providing the housing, so you can't get the rent until that's back online. So those are issues we typically see in that medium 6 week, 6 month mark. And then contractor issues. Usually at this point, it's just, I hired somebody and they haven't done anything yet. And it might be trying to just figure out, is this really going to be something this contractor is going to do? Or do we need to try to get out of that agreement and find somebody else to do it? Any questions on medium term before we go long term? All right, so long-term legal issues, I say 6 months to years, and we're talking like 5, 7, even sometimes up to 10 years on some of these legal issues. These last forever. Contractor issues, if you have a contract that's not in writing, the statute of limitations is 5 years from the date of the breach. If it's in writing, it's 10 years from the date of the breach. And these breaches happen, basically throughout. So that it could be maybe the contractor made the repairs, but they did a terrible job. Our client didn't need somebody else to fix it. For our clients, if they were lucky enough to have insurance or some kind of FEMA benefit or something to help pay for it, they don't have fallback savings or somebody else to help pay them to have it fixed right by somebody else while they go after another contractor that didn't do it well. It's really a tough situation if they hire the wrong contractor. Because again, it's hard to get that repaired if it was not done well the first time. You run into payment disputes in general. So maybe the homeowner didn't pay. There are times where our clients just aren't able to pay. Maybe the price increased significantly with inflation, or if there was, supply shortages. We saw this with derecho 2020, where I might quote you at 20,000, but it turns out after everything was said and done, it was 25, it was 30,000, and our client can't make up that difference. And so it puts them behind. Maybe the contractor, this is no fault of the homeowner. Maybe the contractor didn't pay the subcontractors, and the homeowner has no control over that. But the subcontractors then have a remedy against the house, even if the homeowner didn't have anything to do with the subcontractors. So that's a tough one, because if you don't pay for these kind of repairs that are done in the home, you can face mechanics and judgment liens that could eventually potentially lead to the loss of the house. Usually under Iowa law, you typically can't lose your house unless you don't pay your property taxes or you don't pay your mortgage. Usually if I have like a credit card judgment against me, there can be like a judgment lien to where it can cloud my title and it can hurt my ability to sell the property, but they can't take it from me. It's a protected resource. But there's a specific carve out for these contractor scenarios where they do work on the home, where if they have a judgment lien against you and you don't pay the judgment lien, they could actually ask the court to sell the house. And so that's something that we see down the road that it really makes these contractor situations a little more high stakes. And then we have foreclosures. So especially for our clients that, while their home is being repaired, they're trying to rent somewhere else, they're trying to live somewhere else. Our clients at Iowa Legal Aid anyway, can't afford 2 housing payments at the same time. They just can't do it. So something's going to give, whether it's they're going to be evicted from the house they're in now, or they might fall behind on their mortgage, which can lead to that, leading to a foreclosure scenario. With the city, local government nuisance actions, after a big disaster, typically everybody's in the same boat. There's patience. We're all in this together. Let's clean up, let's do debris removal, things like that. But you start getting 5 years down the road, at some point, patience is going to wear out. And so now you got issues where if the client doesn't take care of the issue, the city might initiate nuisance action against them. If they still don't take care of it, the city might take care of it themselves. And there's an abatement process where they'll bill the property owner for whatever they had to do. And if the client can't pay that, then it gets assessed against their property their property taxes. If they can't pay their property taxes, then there's eventually a property tax sale. So it's this long process that could lead to them losing their house. And then just generally disasters put people behind. So you see years down the road, debt collection issues. Sometimes people need to file bankruptcies to get a fresh start. I think that's the legal issues that I'm going to talk about. Does anyone have any questions about those before I move on?
Josh,
Yes, Steve.
do you want to say a word about mobile manufactured homes? Anything unique about those issues?
I think the hardest thing with the mobile manufactured homes isn't necessarily a legal issue. I mean, it's a little more complicated because sometimes the mobile home resident, do they own the mobile home or do they rent it? Because you're renting the lot. So whether they own the mobile home or rent the mobile home, that kind of changes which code chapter is involved. I think the hardest thing in disaster context, and you all probably know this, this isn't necessarily a legal issue, is just it's hard to find somebody willing to repair a mobile home. So we have a lot of clients right now, and we're looking for if anybody knows any agencies that are willing to do at least labor for mobile home repairs. We've still got, I think, 5 to 7 cases currently that we're working on from the 2020 derecho where they still don't have repairs made to their mobile home. And what that can do is that can lead to, if the park doesn't think they're repairing it, they can give notices that needs to be repaired, or we're gonna basically remove you from the park. We're gonna kick you out. So you have like a very short period of time to move your mobile home. And the mobile home, that's not really mobile at this point. Like you can't, our client would have to pay 10 to 15,000 probably to actually even move it. And that's, you know, some of these, if you tried to move them, they would just fall apart. So it's just a very complicated situation for mobile home owners. But again, if you know anybody that's doing mobile home repair work, we've got some potential referrals, people that could use that help. I'm going to talk briefly about Derecho 2020 because that funds some of the work that I do, including this presentation. So we just had a case this week, and I think the conditions are confidential, so I can't like give all specifics, but basically a situation where after the property had to be vacated after the derecho, there was some destruction done, and our client was facing a large six-figure judgment, and we were able to get that down to where very minimal amount that the client was able to pay. That was just a case that we closed this week. Most of these cases that we're seeing are still like contractor related. Contractors either suing our clients, and then we try to counterclaim with affirmative defenses or counterclaims to try to get to where you can have a reasonable solution. Or clients that are still dealing with repairs that weren't done well. There's some miscellaneous issues that come into too, but most of these can be contractor issues. So the grant that we're doing, legal assistance, case management services. So if we can't help anybody anymore with the legal issues, we try to also do a non-legal kind of holistic needs assessment, or maybe there's some other resources we can tie them to. They need help with food, clothing, housing resources, property tax information, exemptions. Like what can we tangibly help them with if the legal issue is already done? Then we're doing some disaster preparedness counseling, primarily working with disaster prep wise. That program is mostly geared towards folks who are 60 and over. And so that's where our Rural Justice Project for Florida Islands does most of the work with them, but they've got some good preparation materials as well. So that work's going on through at least December of this year. And we're focused on the 12 counties that got FEMA IA declarations, Polk County's included in that. So if you've got anybody that's still affected by the derecho, or sometimes they don't even still think of themselves as I'm still affected by that. But once we do an assessment with them, we can see a ripple effect that we can help address if we can make a connection. Those would be people we can send our way. All right, so time for you guys to work, and I'm not above bribery for audience participation. So Steve is going to walk around and basically with the bribery of candy, we're going to take some time to go through some scenarios, because part of this, the idea is you're going to be working with survivors from a particular disaster event, or at least a lot of you will be. Recognizing that survivor may have some of these legal issues, we're just going to do a legal issue spotting exercise. So I want folks to think about, based on the timeline and the things that I talked about, whether it's an immediate issue, a medium issue, or long-term issue, what kinds of disaster legal issues can you think of that maybe they might need assistance with? So we're going to take just 2 minutes for this first one. Just think about, so you're working with a family whose home was affected by a flood and FEMA individual assistance was not declared. This would be like your 2018 in Polk County scenario where we didn't have FEMA assistance to help. So you take a couple minutes, think about that, maybe write down some legal issues, and then we'll circle back. I'll ask for volunteers, and if you answer, you get candy. If you don't answer and you still want candy, we'll leave the bag up here and you still get some. I don't want people to not get the opportunity. Plus, I don't need it. So 2 minutes. You can talk amongst yourself too. You can collab if you want. I see that
I was thinking, maybe the first issue now is if they own rent it, that can take it down 2 different paths. But if they own it, and I asked the question, do they have insurance? And how insured are they? Are there things that are still on the low, so we guess insurance will cover it?
Yeah.
And Get a contractor to come fix it. Do you have a place to live? To go down the other path, if they were renting. And
One more minute.
it- deposit. Yes, sir. I know some of those landlords. Seems. We to charge around for something you can't have. Really ridiculous court time.
Well, the answer to this. Like, I'm gonna guess that could be a GIC. But I was just thinking, like, if I was the home, if I was a renter.
All right. So any first volunteers for any legal issues that you see, and you don't have to take candy too, if you're like, I don't, candy, that's fine. Just tell Steve, you won't be upset. But any legal issues you can see this family may be having.
Was their house in a floodplain?
The house in the floodplain.
Was their house in a floodplain?
What if it was not?
They'd still have issues. They'd still have issues with immediate housing, close proximity to work or schools. Does their insurance cover a flood? Do they have specific flood insurance or not?
That's the most likely one there. Is that likely if they were not in a floodplain, they either thought, sometimes we even have people tell, like, I was told that I can't get flood insurance if I don't live in a floodplain. That's not true. But more likely than not, especially our client base, they're not going to have flood insurance, especially if they're not in a floodplain. But what if they were in a floodplain as far as the insurance issue? Maybe there's FEMA involved in the past, that same area.
With no FEMA this time, their flood insurance, they may not want to pay. They may have to fight for it.
Yeah.
Also, what about their medication, medical equipment? Was their car damaged, inoperable? So how are they going to get around?
Yeah, and that's sometimes too, we're just trying to do that preventative work ahead of time. You have, your medication list, you have thing like a grab bingo kit where you've got at least, I don't remember how many the recommended number of days is for medications and things, but after the fact, yeah, people don't, and I get it for our clients in particular, but I guess for all of us, life is very busy and it's hard to think about these things ahead of time and to plan for it. And if it's not something that's facing you right now, then it's easy to put in the back burner. But that's good. I think we've got candy here if you want it. So we got the insurance issues and a variety of, kind of practical impacts as far as maybe not having access to medications and things. Any other legal issues you can think of?
One that comes up a lot is they may think, well, I don't live in a floodplain. I either can't or won't get flood insurance. But maybe the damage is caused because the sump pump didn't keep up or was, out of order or whatever. And so now they have 3 inches of water in their basement. And they're wondering why their homeowner's insurance doesn't kick in. So I don't know if there's anything in there that you want to talk about. That was a very, very typical 2018 question, was what I just described. So
Yeah, and that's one that the sewer backup and sump up coverage. Did it come up from below? Did it come from the sides? And there's always the issue of kind of which was it. We had somebody who had actual footage of it coming from below, and I think he even took a shot of outside. It wasn't coming from there, but Sonny, you would know that better than us. But that's typically where we can at least have an argument. As if a person has sewer backup or sump pump coverage. I mean, if they don't have that and it's flooded, there's really not anything we can do. But if they didn't have flood insurance, but there was sewer backup or sump pump coverage, at least we can try to make some arguments. But I think that's the issue: is did it come from outside or from under?
It's called concurrent causation. Yeah, did the water come from was it the responsibility of the flooding? Is that what caused the water? Or was it the sump pump or sewer backed up? And we ran into that a lot in Spencer.
Yeah.
My theory is try and throw it up and see if it sticks, but they've got to have the sump pump rider. If you don't have the sump pump rider, you're completely out of luck, unfortunately.
Yeah, so we're always looking for in a flood, do they at least have that? Because then we've got some arguments we can make. Any other legal issues? Yeah, over here.
Maybe all their stuff is wet, so they can't, do anything. I work at Impact and maybe they can get IGAP coverage though, and we can actually pay to have a sump pump put in mitigation up to $7,000 if FEMA wasn't declared. But maybe all of their stuff is wet, including their legal documents, and now they can't leave, or maybe it was a rental and it's moldy and their landlord doesn't want to deal with it.
Yeah. No, that's where those landlord tenant issues with like some of the, some of the work that we do, and it depends on resources, but in the past, and this isn't even just in disaster, sometimes we try to address not just are you housed or not, but what's the quality of that housing? If it's substandard, can we do something about that? And that's where after a disaster scenario, if a landlord is just refusing to, maybe they can't afford it, maybe they didn't have adequate insurance, or they're a big landlord in town who had, 15, 20, 30 properties go down, they don't do it. That's where you can try to get involved and try to get them out of that situation, to move on to somewhere else. So that's the most landlord tenant issues we run into. Candy, if you want it.
We do. Never say no.
Anybody else? I don't remember if did you say job offline too? That you started out with? I couldn't hear you from the beginning. Maybe you did.
About what?
When you first started talking, did you mention something about job being offline?
What being off?
That's not, just like if you can't work.
Oh, yeah, that would be hard to, yeah, well, I mean, people's electronics get ruined and those ones are really hard to get covered by, I'm a manager of the IGAP. We have a hard time with that stuff, so that makes it hard, and no business loss stuff either, so.
Yeah. We'll get to impact when we talk about other resources, because that's one of the things that, for us, a lot of times whether it's disaster or not, the issues the client's facing, we can help legally, but ultimately it comes down to something else they need tied to. A lot of times that is money. They need money, not my help. And obviously we can't provide that, but trying to be able to direct them to where that they can go for that is important as a disaster responder.
And if this was something that was covered by insurance,
And no homeowners policy covers flood. But if let's say this was a tornado, they could look at their additional living expenses for hotel costs or start getting replacement things done.
All right, we're going to show the answers, or at least some of them. So again, if they're a tenant, you got those landlord tenant issues if they're renting. Insurance issues we talked about. They might have lost their identification documents. They might need help. Again, learning about the Iowa Individual Disaster Assistance Grant Program, because if FEMA is not online, if it's it's not terribly hard to get a state disaster declaration. So if there's some impacts that impacted multiple people, it may be even likely be having that disaster declaration there. And again, it's $7,000 potentially, 200% of poverty. If not, at least have disaster case management services that are there, regardless of income, if there's that declaration. Contractor issues, again, trying to help people initially, and these are kind of I did these in the timeline too. Trying to help people prevent fraud, faulty repairs, and then deal with those after the fact if they happen, and then foreclosure, bankruptcy, property tax sales, local government nuisance actions. I'm going to give you 30 seconds to think of this one, because this is basically the same scenario, different disaster, but again, it doesn't really matter what kind of disaster it is. The legal issues are going to be the same, except for now we're throwing in FEMA IA is declared, and assume that FEMA is going strong at this time when this happens. 30 seconds. All right, so you're working with a family whose home this time was received major damage in a tornado. It's not a flood, but FEMA was declared this time. So what kind of legal issues do you think they'll face? Jamie?
Contractor fraud.
Yes. We'll deal with contractor fraud. I guess that one way that we've seen some folks, just as far as the high pressure, driving around neighborhoods that are affected, trying to say things like, we're only here for a couple of weeks, we only have enough materials to do so many jobs. And people are desperate, especially depending on where you're at, there might not be much local contractor capacity, and maybe they're affected too, and they're, Spencer, the whole business sector got kind of wiped out. So we're only here for a couple weeks, only have enough materials for so many jobs. I'll bump you up the top of the list. If you pay me cash now, we'll get it going. We'll get you back whole. They do that a couple of times and then they take off with that money. And again, if they're an out of state entity that, or it's not even an entity, if they're an out of state scam artist, it's not a legitimate entity. There's it's hard to find them. It's hard to find something to latch onto, to sue, to go after them. So that's what you're trying to prevent, fraud scenarios. It's not as big of an issue in low visibility disasters typically, but it still happens. Any other legal issues with FEMA involved?
The previous list would still apply, maybe with the exception of the Iowa Individual Assistance Program that gets turned off. Sorry, Steve.
Beautiful. AJ nailed it. Exact same list, except for the state assistance programs turned off, and now you have FEMA instead. And so everything's the same, except for now you've got the FEMA issues to deal with. Like the applications themselves, the appeals. FEMA also can do a recoupment process where they look back and say, there was a duplication of benefits. You had insurance pay for that, or we have a client that like SBA paid for the same thing that FEMA paid for, and they wanted the money back. They don't want to duplicate what somebody else was going to pay for. And then you have title issues. For FEMA, typically you either need to be it was you're the owner or you're renting it. And so sometimes our clients, they lived in the property, but they never officially had ownership transferred. Like they owned it constructively. Maybe it was their grandparents and they unofficially inherited it. They never filed the proper paperwork. But in the past, that was a huge issue for FEMA because they didn't have official title. Now there were some rules that were loosened up to where there's other ways you can prove ownership, but that is typically hard to do by yourself. So that's where we can get involved, like no proof. Yes, this person doesn't have the official deed in their name because they never went through that process, but they are the owner. And here's some other ways we can prove that. But yeah, same list, but with FEMA. And the hardest one, this threw us through a loop last year with Perry. We hadn't dealt this before in Iowa, just kind of the indiscriminate school shooting. And I couldn't think of, and I work a lot with Lisa Gavins, the managing attorney of our Cedar Rapids office. She's been responding to disasters since 2008's flooding. We got together, like what kind of legal issues would be involved there, because Mindy Benson, Black Hawk County Emergency Manager, got us connected with Dallas County after this event. So you should talk to legal aid. So I know the answers now, but when we first got this, I didn't. We're connected nationally with our legal aid organization. So I had to phone a friend. We talked to Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid, who responded to the Uvalde shooting. We said, what are we looking for? What's going to happen? What are the issues? So this is hard. So I don't expect anybody to do particularly well with this one because I did not. But anybody think of anything legal issue wise you might deal with in a school shooting?
Maybe they have to care for your kid is traumatized and you can't go to work because you can't leave them with anybody.
Yeah, no, you just hit on two that I'll get at. School trauma. So you have kids that are traumatized. Maybe there's some kind of accommodations that need to be made with the school system to work that out. Like they don't want to go back to the same classroom, or they don't want to go back to the same school for obvious reasons if they were affected by that. And you mentioned inability to get to work. And this was the one that embarrassed me that I didn't figure this one out was, especially, when these things happen, schools are shut down for a long period of time. It might be a month, it might be longer than that. Our clients at Iowa Legal Aid don't typically have paid time off. They just don't have it. So if you have an elementary school involved, especially your little kids, it's kind of a catch-22. Who do I put them with? Do I stay home with them and then don't have income coming in the household? do I let them stay home by themselves and then have DHS issues? You know, what do I do? But anytime, again, without paid time off, they are staying home with those kids to take care of them and they're not bringing that income in. Anytime there's a loss of income, there's an Iowa legal aid related legal issue because now they can't pay their rent, they can't pay their utilities, they can't pay their credit cards or their bills. So that's like the most obvious one is that leads into our normal stuff that we do. There's some specialized legal issues, but that was the one that I should have gotten. You know, it's clients aren't going to work, they're not gonna have money coming in. You got two of them. I don't even want two candy or not. Candy bars. Everybody else? I think you had a presentation maybe from an organization that would apply to some of this. Crime victim compensation. So that was one that was huge in Texas. We didn't necessarily see that here with the Perry shooting, but there's a crime victim compensation process that you can go through to where if you were affected by the school shooting, I guess the state can kind of seek damages on your behalf. So that was one of them that we hadn't thought about. I think they came and talked here. I don't know. I think I saw 10 minutes from them. All right, last chance. So crime victim assistance compensation, GoFundMe is a hard one because it's so well meaning. Let's set up a GoFundMe account for the families that are involved. But there are certain clients that are on asset-based benefits. So at some point, if they get a GoFundMe account, say $10,000, at some point that's going to be considered an asset for them. It can actually get them kicked off of their public benefits. And so there's just some. I don't pretend to be an expert on public benefits. We have people legal aid that are, but that's something you have to be careful with. FMLA issues, you know, is there, so say these folks, you don't have, maybe they don't have paid time off, but maybe they have FMLA to protect them, at least they can come back to work, but maybe they don't. So those issues come up. Do they have job protected status to where they can come back after staying with their kids? Sometimes there needs to be, you know, another, maybe it's a grandparent, maybe it's the non-custodial parent is like, that's not a safe environment for the child. They try to fight for a change of custody, or they try to fight for, now I want guardianship. It's not safe there. So we kind of see an increase in legal issues related to custody of kids and care of kids, power of attorney over kids, those kinds of things. So those are all issues that, again, this was an issue first impression for us. And it's just a good example of, again, you think you're prepared to respond as an entity that's on our end and been doing this for a while, but there are always new scenarios that come up that we don't anticipate necessarily. And this one we probably should have, but they were all novel to us. Any questions on any of the issue spotting? The takeaway is basically if you have somebody affected, there's likely to be legal issues that they could benefit from talking to us. So other resources available. So I mentioned, you know, we as responders need to know where are there resources for folks. And so impact, you know, with disaster case management or the Iowa Individual Assistance Grant Program, those applications, knowing where to go for our clients if there's funding available that can help them. There's this Legal Aid Disaster Resource Center that is it's for survivors, but it's also for legal aid attorneys. But for the survivor side, it has preparation materials, different articles on disasters. There's this Midwest-based heartlanddisasterhelp.org. It's a cool website where you can punch in your address and it will tell you your risk for flood, fire, wind, and heat, I think are the four. So just kind of, if you have a higher risk, it'll tell you some ways to try to mitigate that risk, you know, certain things you can do. Like for fire, for example, is like don't have, you know, your bushes and your shrubs right up against your house, that kind of stuff. Just things that, you know, should be obvious, but people don't think about. We have a mobile disaster app that's got resources for before, during, and after disaster. There's some preparation tools on there. And then our website's also got some disaster relief information. So where do I send people? We have a disaster legal services hotline that's set up. We also have a separate derecho hotline, and with a lot of things going on with the disaster hotline stuff. But I think this is the best place to send people because the same person that checks the derecho hotline also checks this one. And this is where we're just kind of sending all of our current disaster work. We started this particular one last spring and summer when we had all the stuff going on. But it's a 24-hour day, 7 days a week. People can leave a message. It's a voicemail and callback system. So our disaster staff, we have an actual disaster project kind of staff and team at Iowa Legal Aid. We've got a variety of grants that we have that funds that work. So we kind of handle those things separate from our general intake system because we have 150 staff or so at Iowa Legal Aid. Probably 15 left. I mean, we had the AmeriCorps process, not quite that high anymore. It's probably under 35. Probably 10 to 15 of us are pretty well versed in disaster. Everybody else that's not is like not well versed in disaster at all. And so it's important to send people either to this hotline or send people directly to me so that I can get them lined up with the right grant, the right project, the right staff member that should handle the situation. I'll come back to this one. So we get asked eligibility guidelines a lot, and this is all complicated and a lot on the slide, but I'll just say when in doubt, send people. Because at Iowa Legal, we do have general guidelines that we help people up to 125% of federal poverty level. But we have exceptions to that. We can go up to 150% for most of our family law work. And even now, I think we have grants that like are unlimited for not unlimited funding, but we don't have to worry about income or assets for like protective orders. We can go up to 200% for disaster. The idea there is we wanted to be able to help the same people that are eligible for the Iowa Disaster Assistance Grant Program. We want everyone to be able to help the same kind of clientele. And then same with housing. But we don't have any income or asset limitations for islands who are 60 or over. We have special projects that allow us to do that. And we have over 100 different funding sources from different grants that all have special criteria. So when in doubt, just send somebody. It might be one of these general things apply and we can't help them, but it might be we've got a special grant that they can fall under and fit into regardless of their income or assets. So just wanted people to, yeah, go ahead.
I just saw you mention a mobile response or team. Is that a vehicle that goes to special events or what does that look like?
The team I was talking about is just, it's actually kind of statewide staff that they're all funded by different grants that we have that are kind of backward looking. But then the nice thing is if something new happens, they can drop the backward looking stuff temporarily to deal with the current stuff. So we're about as well staffed as we've ever been for disaster work. But we do have a mobile intake unit, a justice bus, what we call it. It's a Class C RV. It's basically kind of like a roving legal office. It's self-contained. We've got Starlink, so we're able to anywhere in the state, we're able to go and basically provide an opportunity for somebody to meet confidentially with us. Because sometimes these mark events, there's usually kind of confidential places you can go, but a lot of times it's pretty hectic. Might be in a gymnasium, you might be in Minden. I think we were in a small Sunday school classroom, like, and there's 2 or 3 other agencies in there with you. So it's hard to, especially in Minden, where I think the mayor was the primary landlord. He was also the primary employer in town. It's like, well, anyway, so you can lead to some conflict issues with that. So it's a good spot that we're able to be out there and be visible and have a spot where people can come and like have, again, a competition.
What they're like disasters?
Yeah, we
Pretty much.
deployed the unit to Minden, Greenfield, and Spencer last year. We also were in Riverside, Sioux City area, Correctionville. So typically what we do when we're at a mark with the justice bus is we'll have a table that we staff inside the event, but we'll also have the justice bus available for if people want to have, again, that more confidential conversation. Then we take it to outreach events, fairs. We'll be at the state fair with it. We go to a variety of different, there's opportunities for us to come at an event, and that kind of serves as our outreach table. We set up a table in front, but if people want to go inside and have a conversation there, we've got 2 different offices inside kind of deal. And that's one thing too, I'm glad you bring that up is, we're always looking for opportunities to do outreach, to meet with people where they are, whether that's, just thinking in the older island context, sometimes there's senior fairs or things like that, but if there's any sort of community event where we can have a table and get the word out, not just about disaster issues, that's part of it, but about what Iowa Legal Aid does in general. We try to, wherever we're at in the state doing outreach, and through the 3 projects that I manage, we are hitting up all 99 counties. We try to talk to people about whatever project might help clients in their particular service area. So if there's ever opportunities you can think of, we'd love to have Legal Aid come and be part of it, to be part of an event or to present to your agencies or collaborate on any sort of initiative you got going on. Those are things that we're looking for throughout the state. So we got 12:29, so I'm happy to stick around a little bit too, but any questions? That's the last slide. Yeah. Hey, I'm a professional emailer, not by choice, but that's my preferred method is just email me if you've got, even if you send somebody out legal aid and maybe they're not hearing back or there's an issue that comes up. I mean, just, again, I'm the one that can connect where it needs to go or handle it. So, if you run into issues like that, just email me. And I'm here in Des Moines, so.
Josh, I just want to say, just based on experience, thank you, because everything you've said, you follow through on, you're dependable, the team has been available. And the challenge level you guys have with dealing with so many gray areas is remarkable. So just a big thank you to you and your team. So keep up the great work and appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. Again, it was a busy year last year. Hopefully not gonna let me keep things quiet. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you. Maybe I'll stick around for a little bit. If anybody wants candy, even if you didn't answer a question, Steve will have it over there somewhere.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Again,